Hey everybody, welcome to Office Hours. Higher Learning Test Prep, Jeremy Champa, remote tutors, the whole thing. We're going to get going here. So I want to talk about 3 questions from the same test, October 2017. I've been working on this test with some students and we have some questions. We're going to look at a reading question, and what we're going to try to notice is what happens on evidence sets. We're going to look at a grammar question that asks a really specific question. And then we're going to look at a math question that's in a spot that presents as difficult, but actually the question isn't that hard. And kind of what happens if you find a question that seems easy in a supposedly, a place where a difficult question should be. So before we get into those, let me just mention for those of us who are here for the first time, Office Hours is free. Anyone who wants to ask a question, you're more than welcome to ask a question during the session here, or to email us, or get in touch on Skype, or leave something in the comments and let us know what your question is, and we'd be happy to answer it live during office hours for you. And this goes for students, this goes for parents, this goes for college counselors. Anyone can ask a question and we'll be happy to go over it. Not just people who are working with us currently, but just anyone. We want to get the word out that there's lots of stuff about the SAT that is misunderstood, and we want to sort of correct that for a lot of folks if we can. So let's jump into a few of these questions. As always, beware of the vortex. The vortex is coming for you, clearly. Sorry about that. I'm getting over to my chalkboard here. In the meantime, Google starts to go into this vortex. Anyways, so this is a reading question, and this is about evidence. And if you want, if you're not watching this video live, you can pause it and read this information if you want. But essentially, this question is asking about, first of all, it's an inference question. It says, what can be reasonably inferred? That's an important framing. And it asks why this person, old widow Lau, what we can infer from her reluctance to stay. What's true about that reluctance? So the answer that almost everyone picks is this one, because it says the word busy, and the right evidence actually does mention that word busy. The word busy gets mentioned in 15 to 18, so I'll just sort of bracket that off for you here. That's like from here to like here. Old widow Lau refused their invitations 3 times, exclaiming that my father and uncles must be too busy for visitors. And now you're gonna definitely see why busy makes sense here. And appropriate, because what this old lady's doing is being polite. She's like, oh, no. You're too busy to have me right now. But the question becomes, if you fall in love, try to draw a heart here. I'm not the best artist, but if you fall in love with these words, appropriate and busy, then just make sure the rest of it makes sense. Namely, is the shop unusually busy? Now, it does say earlier that the uncle was, busy. I believe it says somewhere up here. Yeah, he was busy with a customer. But does that say, is that unusual? Is there any evidence that that's unusual? If not, don't be so quick to pick this answer. Ultimately, what this evidence says, aside from the fact that they're too busy for visitors, is also this last piece. She made weak efforts to leave. So she's being overly polite. And most high school students don't know the word feigned, which means acting or pretending or faking. She feigned a reluctance to stay for tea because she's not genuinely firm in her resolve. She made weak efforts to leave. What I want you to learn from this is it doesn't matter if you don't know where the word feigned is. If the rest of this answer makes sense, I mean, she's certainly not being inconsiderate. It's not ill-advised. That doesn't really make a heck of a lot of sense. I haven't seen anybody pick those yet. If you did, I'm not saying that you don't have a reason for it. Please let us know what your reason is, and I'd be happy to work that into an explanation next time. But in the meantime, I've seen a few students pick this answer. Appropriate and busy look great, but even if you can be clear that there's nothing about unusual, especially it has to be true in these lines. The lines themselves have to say something about this being unusual. And if you don't know this word, that's not a good reason to cross this answer off. If the rest of it makes perfect sense and there's something wrong with C, then by process of elimination, we've got to pick A. Right? So there's certainly more to say about this question, but most importantly, if you fall in love with a couple of the keywords, particularly a word that's mentioned in the passage, exact language, don't let that be the reason you pick an answer. And don't let a word that you don't know, like feigned, be the difference either. Use a process of elimination, a deductive approach, and you can get through that question. Okay, so I hope that made some sense. We're going to move on now to a question. I think the next question I have queued up. Well, let's just see. Back into the vortex. Either way, I think it's going to be a grammar question here. So here comes your vortex followed by the screen share. We're going to talk about this grammar question. It's pretty interesting because it's really easy to get lost in this in these questions that ask something specific. The important thing here is the word contrast between Sternbach's techniques and the people that she photographs. And a lot of folks end up with C. It would be hard to tell that they're subjects or surfers. Now, the thing is, up here, it tells us that she works on, that, her work deals with, it depicts surging surfs, rolling waves, and surfers who ride them. To say it would be hard to tell that her subjects are surfers if not for the modern board shorts and bikinis they wear, there's no real contrast between the technique. Now, by the way, the technique is this like old form of photography. And that old form of photography we learned earlier in the passages from the 19th century. But the really important part is to think about the contrast here. The correct answer is the original. By the way, no change is a great answer. It's not any less likely to be right just because it's no change. 19th century and modern. Really pay attention to, they're asking for a contrast, and this gives a clear contrast. People will say, well, I really like how C sounds. It's like, yeah, but where's the contrast? I don't really see, just because it's hard to tell that they're surfers doesn't really contrast with what they're wearing, right? So we want a strong contrast between the techniques and the people. So she's photographing modern people using an old technique, and 19th century and modern is the contrast you want to notice. So let's just talk about for a second, like what happens most generally on these questions. Like there's two kinds of questions in grammar. There's questions, I should say, in the writing and language section. There's pure grammar questions. Those ones don't give you a prompt. They just show you 4 answer choices and ask you which one is right. But any question that asks you a prompt, pay really close attention to what they're asking. Like in this case, they were asking about a contrast. So if you focus on what sounds good, you're going to get thrown off. Other answers are going to sound good. Only one answer is going to have the contrast that you need to answer the question. Just think about it. It's a multiple choice test, and what we're looking for is an answer that's perfectly matched up with the question. So if you focus on something super tangible in the question, like the word contrast, you're going to find that contrast with a modern and 19th century that you don't find elsewhere, even though the other answers sound good. Okay, hope that makes sense. If not, please let us know, and we'd be happy to help more. In the meantime, back through the vortex to the screen share. Oops, there we go, screen share. And we're going to add a question to the board here. This last one is a math question. I want to note the number here. This is number 30 in a math section. 1 through 30 in this calculator section get progressively harder. So we're on, the last question, one of the hardest questions in the section. Then 31 through 38 kind of can be a mixed bag. They're supposed to ascend in difficulty, but sometimes 31's easy, sometimes 31's hard. Bottom line is this question is supposed to be really hard. And they ask you something really basic. They ask you to come up with a linear equation to match this graph. That doesn't sound like the kind of math that should be the difference between getting into an Ivy League school or not, right? So just to be clear, it's the things that I've seen folks do wrong here. The first mistake is folks go, well, the y-intercept looks to be right about here, right, which is about 402. So I'm going to pick one of these 2 answers. And then you can say, well, the slope looks not that steep, so maybe I'll pick this answer. And then you'd be like, oh, maybe that's too unsteep, so maybe it's B, because it's, I've seen people make both mistakes. What I want to notice is even if you like these based on 402, you have to ask yourself, why in the world does this slope of 33, I'm sorry, 33 come up? Certainly it's somewhat related to this slope, but why does it come up twice? And the reason you're asking yourself that question is because the answer choices give you clues. They're not going to put answer choices at number 30 to a seemingly straightforward question that don't have anything to do with the answers, right? So by using the answer choices, you can double check your work in a different way than you did it originally. That's really important. So you would ask yourself about these slopes, and the easiest way to answer something about these slopes is to find a couple points that you like. Like, I'll pick this one. This point is like 14, comma, I don't know, like 540, let's say, something like that. Doesn't have to be precise because these slopes are pretty different. So, and then we'll find another point. How about this one up here, which is like 22 and then a little bit more than 800. I'll call it 810. Okay, so if we did like a slope analysis, we would say the difference between these 2 points is, let's see, 270, I believe. And then the difference between these 2 points is 8. And 270 divided by 8, I could bust a calculator out, but just real quick here, that would be 135 over 4, which would be, let's see, 67.5 over 2. And then, yeah, that means it's that the slope is roughly, you know, half of 67.5 would be like 33.75, I think, something like that. Bottom line is you don't even have to use a calculator to see that that's obviously the slope is these ones. And I got those points directly from this graph, right? So I feel good about this slope now. Now, another mistake I saw a student make is say, oh, well, look, 300, that's got to be right. Because it's like, you know, roughly here. But it's like, that doesn't look like 300. That looks like 400. And just because it's close, you're on number 30. You want to know, like, well, why the heck is this even here? It's clearly wrong with my approach, right? So you want to ask yourself those questions, which is, why would a reasonably smart person make a mistake on this question? We figured out that the 402 questions, the ones are wrong, which is weird because it looks like it's at 402. Now, a couple ways to figure out that what the actual intercept is. First of all, you can see that it's not 402 because actually this is not x equals 0. The y-intercept is where x equals 0, and our graph starts at 10 here, which is a problem. So the real, like, that's how you can tell that 402 is wrong, but how you can tell what the right answer is, I mean, you could say, look, I know what my slope is. I know that we're at like this point here, which is, you know, roughly 10 comma 402. And then I know I need to go down 10 units. Each unit goes down 33. So 10 units is down like 330, which gets you, you know, 330 off of this, or I'm sorry, not 330. 330 off of 402 is like, what, 72, right? I think. That's really damn close to this number. Then I would feel comfortable picking D. I could also put this into an equation. I know what my slope is now, like, right? It's like 33. So I could say something like, you know, D equals 33T plus B. And I could put the values I've already used, like, you know, maybe 540 equals 33 times the T value of 14 plus B. And I could solve, I'd end up getting 84, which is the right answer. Now, again, that was a lot of work, but what I want you folks to notice is the way that I use the answer choices to check my work. You know, I ask myself small questions. I'm going to get rid of the screen share now. I asked myself small questions about the answer choices. This is about using the answer choices to ask yourself, not like what's the right answer, not am I right, not did I do the question right, but to think about the question differently than you thought about it the first time you did it, or differently than you would from the beginning. Or another way of saying that is, why would a smart person get this question wrong? It's number 30. This is a question that has been designed by smart people to help colleges discern the sharpest students from other kids who are also sharp, but just not ultimately sharp. Now, of course, this isn't a perfect measure of your intelligence, but that's what they're attempting to do here, is to differentiate between the smartest kids and almost the smartest kids. So you have to ask yourself then, why would someone get this wrong? It feels so easy. It's about linear equations and like a graph. This shouldn't be hard, right? So I'm not saying that you should do it non-traditionally. Certainly, if you do it traditionally, you want to use the answer choices to check your work, right? And you want to use the similarities between answer choices because it's not like the answers are totally random. They have to do with mistakes that people make, right? So something I always say to myself is, why would somebody mess this up? Why would this go wrong if it feels so damn easy to me? And if I can't answer that question right away, I owe it to myself to spend a little bit longer examining the answer choices and asking myself specific questions. Why is 33 here? Right? Why are these y-intercepts so far off? Those kind of questions. So I hope that was helpful. I've got to bounce. I got one more student to get to. And I just want to say thank you all for joining me. And I hope that if you have any questions about the SAT or about the ACT, we haven't done much with the ACT yet, but we're going to talk about that as needed as you guys come up with the good questions for us. So the companies that are providing this to you are Higher Learning Test Prep and Remote Tutors. RemoteTutors.com is a great place to go for more info. HigherLearningTestPrep.com also equally nice place to go to. So check those places out and see if there's any questions that you have, not even just about the test, but about, big picture. How do I study? Or, how do I use the resources that I have? Or, which test is best for me? All those kind of questions. Whatever question you have, get in touch and we're happy to help. This is free, and we hope you'll share this video with your friends and also invite them to get in touch. Even if they don't want, tons of help. If they just have a couple little questions, by all means, I think we're a great resource and we'd be happy to help. So until next time, I hope you guys have a good time and I hope your studying goes well. Take care.